Welcome to the Money GPS. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. This is going to be an interesting one because I'm going to talk about a few different topics that I haven't been able to touch on recently, and I think they're important. Perhaps this is more of a geopolitical stance as well as what's happening with inflation, and I think we need to get into that. There was this information here that's contained within that was supposed to be in the other video. You'll see it after this one, but it was just too long. So I'm going to put it here right now for you because I think it's too important to simply just let go of. Let's get into it right away. This particular report or article, whatever you want to call it, is talking about many factors and what we're seeing right now today and the concerns and so on. But I just wanted to point out one thing. The recession debate. While our recession indicators have yet to flash a definitive signal, most of them are very close to trigger. Given what we have said about the Fed and the fragility of the markets, our guess is that the lead time of those indicators will be shorter than what they have been historically in the recession, could well start in 2022 in the US. It is significant because bear markets tend to be much more severe when a recession occurs. And what are they talking about here? Well, we have this signal, number one, about the yield curve inversions that are taking place. You've got record levels of debt, and you have, of course, this massive stimulus effect that had come before this. We've got inflation at highs that we haven't seen in many decades. And so the Federal Reserve and other central banks around the world have started to increase interest rates. We have never seen a global coordinated effort like we are watching today. It's not the Fed. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not the Fed. It is all central banks except for, well, basically one, that is China, that's all right now doing the same thing. They're stopping their quantitative easing programs. They're actually reducing the balance sheets in some cases, and they are going for higher interest rates. Can the markets, or I should say the economy, withstand higher interest rates? Of course not. Of course not. But has that stopped them in previous instances? No. Excuse me. Looking at the Federal Reserve, I thought this was hilarious because you have the governor, okay, the governor of the Fed, Waller. He was talking about real estate and inflation and so on. You could see this right here. I mean, come on. Look at this at the bottom. As we know, a singular feature of the US expansion since the beginning of 2020 has been the red hot housing market. Trust me, I know it's red hot because I'm trying to buy a house here in Washington and the market is crazy. So even the Federal Reserve, even their individuals can't afford the market. Excuse me, sorry. And it's just, it's unbelievable. I mean, you don't hear that. But even the guy who's printing the money can't afford the house. I mean, not that far, but I mean, that's what we're dealing with, right? Look at this. Venezuela breaks one of the world's longest hyperinflation bouts. So apparently the monthly inflation rate has been under 50% for the past 12 months. Now, I'm not in Venezuela, and I think trying to calculate inflation at these levels is likely impossible, but it has come down. That's what they're suggesting. Interesting fact here is that the US dollar is being used in more than 60% of transactions. So this is a big change because when you're trying to use a currency that has no value, of course, you're going to have problems. And when they start to use the US dollar, and another thing, by the way, I think I might have mentioned it before, but I definitely read that article. It was saying the fact that Venezuela is starting to opt for, opening up to some degree. And think about what happened with China, why they became so successful was that great opening up that happened. As soon as they got away from the old ways and started to say, okay, let's have some of this. Let's have some of this. It was like just a bunch of money just swelled inside. The economy boomed up. Let's be honest. The economy boomed, growth boomed. And now, over the past, let's say, decade, things are different. We're seeing closing in. We're watching, preparations for what I believe is much harder times. I think they know something's going on, and there's a big change. But leading up into that, they opened up. And so now we have Venezuela perhaps we'll see doing some of that. On top of this, we're watching, and I think I have it here, but yes, in the next article, we'll talk more about that. There is this idea that, hey, maybe the US and Venezuela will have a few conversations. And of course, countries need to talk. They need to discuss things. They don't need to be, having battles with each other. It's not going to serve the interests of the people. We need to have peace. That's what we need ultimately. But of course, that's not good for the MIC. You know what I'm talking about? Venezuela broke a 4-year bout of hyperinflation, one of the longest in the world. The government slowed down the pace of money printing. Hey, wouldn't that be... Hey, you're printing a lot of money. Well, if you stop, do you think it could impact the inflation rate? Yes, that's right. So we'll see what happens here. I personally, I don't trust any numbers in terms of the inflation rate. Like I said, you can't, it's just going to be so inaccurate. Okay. But here you can see the Café con Leche index, something that I have shown you before. It's basically the price of coffee, using the price of coffee to determine inflation rate. Great indicator. It's only one thing, okay? But I trust that over, other things. Pardon me. I think what happens when you do 2 videos at nearly 2 a.m. That's what happens. But anyway, here we have it. Just looking at Venezuela. I hope Venezuela and other countries can, turn things around, because there's a lot of people. I mean, look at what happened with Venezuela. People fleeing to Colombia, fleeing to Trinidad and Tobago, fleeing to Brazil. I mean, anywhere they can go. So there's some serious issues. And one of the factors, I was talking with somebody who is Venezuelan, and I actually, in my interview that I did with Elijah, Finance and Liberty, was the other guy that was Venezuelan. He was basically saying that in general, you would think during a hyperinflation, you're going to have, real estate that does well, because real assets do well. He said, but there's just one problem, because you had this basically outflow of people just leaving. Well, then you had a lot of inventory. So keep that in mind. If you start to see massive outflows of people, the real estate there, I mean, depending on the trend where you were at, that's going to be a factor. So keep that in mind. I thought it was really interesting, because you don't hear about that too often, like population decline. Not in many areas, although Manhattan did see that. But Manhattan's a very different situation than, areas of Venezuela, that's for sure. U.S. weighs engagement with Venezuela, a Russian foothold in America's backyard. I'm thinking the potential right now for the U.S. to remove some of the sanctions is going to obviously positively benefit what's happening in Venezuela. So why they're doing this, of course, I think with Iran as well as with Venezuela, I think they're trying to loosen up a little bit so that they can get more oil onto the market to have, basically, less dominance coming from Russia. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know if that's going to be the case. We don't know. But I thought it was important. I wanted to mention it. World taps Canada for potash, uranium as war roils markets. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has disrupted global supplies. We have been approached. Canada, that's right. Canada, so many resources, nothing being done about it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. There's so much. There's so much. Make it happen. Okay? Make it happen. If your country has resources, if your country has something, make it happen. Deliver to the people. The people can benefit from it. Either they're working directly there, either you got entrepreneurs that are dealing with it somehow. Something's got to happen. My goodness. Please. All right. Anyway, they're just talking. I'm ranting. I know. But it's important. That's the reason I wanted to do this video. They're talking about potash, commonly used fertilizer, and uranium have been swept up in the global commodities rally after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia is a major source of uranium and a low-cost, high-volume global producer for all major fertilizers. Yes, that's right. So we will see what happens here. I've been talking about uranium for a while. Canada's one of those places that can definitely output some serious uranium, okay? Let's get into this last little bit. I talked about the migration, the outflows. Well, here we have it, where counties are growing. I thought it was interesting, actually. In one case here, Florida. Now you see different areas that are doing real well. Okay, look at this. I mean, you can see that dark green. Dark green is a gain of 1.6% or more. And then, in these areas here, right in that southeastern side, it's actually a loss. Now, there are some places here, California seeing this as well, and others. What could be happening here? Well, there's different reasons. In some places, prices are simply too high. Jobs are not available, jobs don't pay enough, and they simply move out. Now, they might move within the state, but you're looking at these counties and you're seeing that. So I thought it was interesting. That's according to the census.gov directly. So this is not some sort of, little tiny bit of information. This is accurate stuff. So definitely check it out if you're interested. All the links, as always, description below. Exxon weighs taking gas to Bitcoin pilot to 4 countries. I thought it was really interesting to see what not just them but others have done. Miners are pushing to use flared gas to power operations. This is basically, essentially a waste product for them anyway. And then they take that and they convert it into mining cryptocurrency. And so I don't know, but this could be a new trend that happens. And now, obviously, I think this is more control of Bitcoin in the hands of the few, probably because they're going to be able to mine a lot more than the average individual could. But in general, it just shows that there is interest from big corporations in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So that's all I wanted to mention really right here today. I hope that you did find this informative. It was different than most, and that's why I really like to cover this type of stuff, because it helps me to analyze my thoughts. I hope it does help you out as well in some way. If you found it informative, hit that thumbs up button, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.